Creating a resilient and sustainable future for all is the ambitious theme of this year's Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Gathering, currently underway in San Francisco, as leaders meet for multilateral as well as bilateral exchanges amid a host of security concerns worldwide. So what are the implications of the US-China summit on global trade and stability? How is President Yoon Suk-yeol linking North Korea's hostile weapons intentions to regional economic interests? And are the prospects of a miscalculated move by North Korea destabilizing the Korean peninsula high? Welcome to Asians and Insiders. Today we have our panel of foreign journalists to touch upon this year's Apec gathering in San Francisco, where much spotlight appears directed on the bilateral summits among leaders rather than the broader multilateral meeting. For more, I have Jack Barton here in the studio. Jack, as always, welcome.
Great to be back.
I also have Nicola Smith with us. Nicola, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Jack, let's start off then with the highly anticipated meeting between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday, of course. Now, there was much talk about a potential restoration of military communication lines prior to the actual summit. What's the latest on that front, and what do you believe the significance of having these lines restored?
Well, it seems the lines are going to be restored, and that agreement has been made, and it's very important that that agreement is made, and perhaps no surprise that it has been, given this is a very different meeting between Chinese and American leaders than we saw around 5 years ago between Trump and Xi at Mar-a-Lago, when China was still, for all its problems, very much on the ascendant. And you know, now we see people talking about not so much when will China surpass America, but when will the economy implode, with spiraling youth unemployment and the real estate sector on the rocks, and, you know, personal debt so high. So this was a summit where China, not coming cap in hand, that's for sure, but needed to re-solidify its links with the United States, and of course it was going to offer some things. Having said that, this is a win-win, to steal their parlance, for both countries, given that, you know, the possibility of something very dangerous happening in the South China Sea or near Taiwan is very real, and for there not to be military-to-military contacts between the United States and China is an extremely dangerous situation for both countries. So I think for both, you know, this is good that they were restored. They were, of course, abandoned in 2022, I think it was, after Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. It's good that they're back on, and also it seems they've agreed to have personal contacts. So Xi and Biden will be able to contact each other directly in the event of something. And of course, this is on top of a lot of other agreements that we've seen come out of here. And I think for China also the big win is probably just kind of, in its eyes, the respect it's being given. You know, the fact that it's being given a sort of a formal and friendly greeting by the Biden administration and treated as perhaps the second most powerful country in the world. And for China, on top of all the tangible agreements that have been made, this is also a very important takeaway.
Right, and staying with that summit, Nicola, what else was addressed by these two leaders that perhaps you believe may be of great interest to the broader international community, including South Korea, of course?
Yeah, I think you really need to keep looking at the bigger picture here, because the overarching aim of this meeting was to reset relations between the US and China, and that is also in everybody's interest, that these two global superpowers are talking to each other. You have two of the world's most powerful men who haven't had a conversation this year until this week in San Francisco. Relations were in the deep freeze after China stopped talking to America when it shot down the alleged Chinese spy balloon in February. And this is a time of great global uncertainty. You've got two hot conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. And so it's definitely in everybody's interest that America and China are at least they have at least opened the lines of communication, and they have dialed down the tensions between themselves. They don't agree on very much at all, but they at least have agreed that they can talk. And that is already progress that everyone can welcome. The last thing the world needs is a third geopolitical crisis, whether it be on the Korean Peninsula or, as Jack mentioned, in the South China Sea, or over the Taiwan Strait. You see at at the moment, every week you're having confrontations between the Chinese Coast Guard and Philippine vessels over disputed territories in the South China Sea. And it has been a concern for a long while now that if something were to go wrong, if even an accident, that in the absence of that direct hotline between the US and China and other parties, that it could rapidly escalate. So what we've seen this week in San Francisco is at least an agreement to talk to each other again, which in itself is a major outcome. We did also see some agreement on counter-narcotics operations, which again is in global interest. Hopefully that will cut global crime linked to narcotics smuggling. And there was also some discussion of artificial intelligence and how to control that better, especially in the military context.
Right, and staying with Washington-Beijing ties, Jack, US authorities have pledged that they are seeking not to de-risk, de-risk that is, and not decouple from China. Do you suppose their actions thus far have well reflected their words?
Well, I think de-risk and decouple mean the same thing. It's just Biden trying to soften the language ahead of the summit to set a nicer tone for China, again, to show a little bit of respect. But really it means the same thing when they're talking about tariffs or blacklisting certain companies they feel are a security threat, or denying China or attempting to deny China access to high-end semiconductor or the components that might create high-end semiconductors, or even little minor details like banning Chinese drones for personal use on US military installations. Whatever you look at, the US would view this as de-risking and decoupling, and probably everybody would as well. How successful has whatever of these terms been? There has been a little bit of decoupling, but these two economies are so deeply integrated, it's impossible to completely decouple them. They would fare very badly if they ever attempted to truly do it. But having said that, yeah, it's going on, and in a way there's some momentum. Initially, companies were very, very reluctant to decouple, pushed by Washington. But now with the new Espionage Act in China and the fact that individuals are being rounded up or denied the right to leave the country, or you're seeing a lot of nervousness amongst business. So I think this is also Xi coming to reassure businesses that, okay, we're reversing this trend a little bit. It is going to be a safer environment. And importantly, I think what the Chinese are talking about is not reversing some of the decoupling that's happened, because that's not going to happen in terms of, the blacklist, but saying, okay, how about we draw a line here, and this is as far as it goes, and we don't have any more. And the Americans haven't completely agreed to that, but there seems to be some subtle consensus that, okay, we're going to have a pause here, we're going to have a reset, let's see if we can get these relations back on track again.
Right. And beyond these two superpowers, Nicola, President Yoon Suk-yeol is seeking his own one-on-ones with his partners across the globe to raise concerns about North Korea's purported collaboration with Russia on the weapons front. Now, addressing questions by the Associated Press, President Yoon Suk-yeol claimed that North Korea's collaboration on the arms front has security implications for all. To what extent do you believe, Nicola, that this is a valid claim?
I believe that it is valid on multiple points and multiple levels. If we look, first of all, at what the allegations are of this arms deal, both the United States and South Korea have said that North Korea is providing ammunition to Russia, including anti-tank missiles, artillery, to prolong its war in Ukraine. And that could possibly be in exchange for Russia providing North Korea with technological expertise on satellites. We know that North Korea wants to launch a military reconnaissance satellite in the near future. It could also be providing help with nuclear weapons technology. So if this is happening on the scale that is alleged, we saw the US a few weeks ago saying that more than 1,000 containers had been spotted on the Russia-North Korea border, which may contain ammunition. If it's happening on that scale, then first of all, you have a human cost in Ukraine. This will lead to more civilian casualties. It will also prolong has the potential to prolong Putin's war in Ukraine, which again destabilizes the global economy, and it's extremely, it has repercussions around the world. And then if you're looking closer to home, it also has the potential to destabilize the Korean Peninsula and the region if Russia is helping Pyongyang with nuclear weapons technology, helping it with equipment or expertise that will allow Kim Jong-un to build intercontinental ballistic missiles or shorter range missiles, then that does have implications for not only South Korea, but for Japan, for the wider region, for the whole of East Asia, and out towards America as well. So it is, again, in everyone's best interests if this is reined in. And then, again, on the international stage, both Russia and North Korea are undermining basic principles of the United Nations Security Council when it comes to sovereignty and territorial integrity, and resolving disputes peacefully. This is all being undermined, and if this is undermined now, then it will be undermined in other situations as well.
Right, indeed. And going back to concerns closer to home or at home, one concern, Jack, is that North Korea may miscalculate and make a move against South Korea, believing that the international community is very preoccupied with conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Now, based on your coverage of North Korea-related issues, what are your thoughts on the prospects of such a scenario? North Korea miscalculating and making a move?
Well, look, if you'd asked me, even after 2014, after Russia seized Crimea, Donetsk and parts of Luhansk, if they would launch a full-scale invasion and try and topple the government and seize the country, I would have said chances are very small. And if you asked me last year if Hamas would fly into Israel on paragliders and blow multiple holes in the wall, seize military bases and kill 1,400, I would have said chances are very low. So normally I would say chances are low, but at the moment I'm going to err on the side of caution and say this is something we should genuinely worry about. And this relationship between Russia and North Korea, particularly not just because Russia is aiding with the technology in missiles, whether it be solid fuel or I assume heat shields for the weapons as well, which North Korea reportedly haven't perfected yet. But also we know Russia's playbook, particularly in Soviet times, and Putin is a product of the Soviet times, is to stir up trouble elsewhere to divert attention away from its aims. And so a conflict in East Asia would be absolutely to Russia's benefit. To see US forces diverted to East Asia would be the most positive outcome that the Russian leadership could see from all of this. So no doubt behind the scenes, somehow Russia was probably coaxing North Korea into something. And of course, if anything ever happened in Taiwan, we have 28,500 troops here. And if the US became involved with that, it would be hard to see how South Korea wouldn't be embroiled in that conflict and how North Korea wouldn't see a golden opportunity that couldn't be missed. So in all this instability, I think it's another reason why it's great to see America and China stabilizing their relationship, because I'm sure China is looking on nervously at this close relationship between Russia and North Korea as well. And so it's good to see that relationship stabilizing a little bit, because it brings a little bit of stability back into that situation as well. But yeah, I think we should be worried, unfortunately.
Right, and speaking about China's concern, we're looking with concern the relationship between North Korea and Russia. There are hopes that President Yoon Suk-yeol will sit down with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the Apec summit. Now, should these two leaders sit down, Nicola, what issues, apart from North Korea, of course, do you see topping their talks?
Well, this would be their first meeting since Bali last year, last November, and a lot has happened in that year. We've seen South Korea and Japan become much closer and also form much closer link, a trilateral link with the United States. So I would imagine that that would be something that President Xi would want to talk about, and he would be seeking assurances from President Yoon that this would not undermine South Korea's relationship with Beijing. So that would certainly top the agenda for both leaders, I believe. And South Korea has, on several occasions over the past few months, again, raised the possibility of President Xi playing a constructive mediator role in terms of dialing down this relationship between Russia and North Korea, which China will also be nervous about. China and Russia have shown, they have also had warming relations in the past year, but there's still an element of distrust between China and Russia and North Korea. It's more of a relationship of convenience. So I think that would definitely be a major issue that they would want to discuss, and that President Yoon would really want to impress on President Xi that he could play a very constructive role here, not only in curbing this relationship between Russia and North Korea, but also in pressuring North Korea to dial down its own nuclear program and to calm tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And then, of course, you would have discussions about economics, the economic relationship, trade relationship, closer cooperation, and how this can be balanced alongside US pressure on China and US export controls on semiconductor chips, and also looking at resilience of supply chains. South Korea and China already have a very strong economic relationship, so that would certainly be a major point of discussion for them.
Right, and staying with the economy and technology, Jack, President Yoon is also scheduled to sit down for a roundtable with his Japanese counterpart, Fumio Kishida, I believe at Stanford University. What are your thoughts on efforts by these two leaders to further bolster their ties?
I don't think South Korea and Japan, not in the short term or even medium term, are going to get over the legacy issues from the colonial period or the Second World War. Those issues will continue to fester on. Whether you believe, Japan said it's compensated enough, it's apologized enough, was the apology deep enough, but still you have the issues of textbooks, you have the Yasukuni shrine visits, these issues go on and on and on. But I think what Yoon in particular is really trying to do is just reset the relationship back to how it was between, say, 1965, when the Japanese government paid a lot of compensation, up until it really fell apart under the previous administration. And that is to have legacy issues on one track and security and economic issues on another track. And perhaps under Yoon, we're seeing even a greater emphasis on stronger security ties. Perhaps we're seeing, more than we've ever seen in the past. Well, for certain, we're seeing that. But that's really what's going on here. And I know Koreans are a bit divided on this issue. Personally, I think it's a good thing. South Korea and Japan have a lot to offer each other in terms of security cooperation and economic cooperation. They are stronger for it, for deeper cooperation. And I know Yoon will get quite a bit of criticism at home for these moves. But I personally believe it's a good thing for both countries, particularly for South Korea, given the tensions with North Korea as well. And so any of these moves can't hurt. But again, it's about getting them on two track. You're not going to overcome the legacy issues. And people should have their sort of right to pursue the grievances that they believe are still out there. But it's good to see that that's moving back onto two tracks again, and there can be a civil relationship and a stronger economic and security partnership.
Right, and prior to that event, the roundtable, tech roundtable at Stanford University, President Yoon, Nicola, will be taking part in the US-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework on Thursday on the sidelines of the Apec meeting. Could you tell us a bit about this planned gathering?
Sure. Well, this Indo-Pacific Economic Framework was launched last year in Japan. It had 14 founding members, including South Korea, Japan, Australia, Singapore, countries that account for some 40% of global GDP. And it was widely perceived to have been founded to counter China's rising economic clout in the region by bringing together like-minded nations to establish common rules, standards on 4 different groupings. So those were trade and supply chains, clean energy, infrastructure, and tax and anti-corruption. China saw it as an attempt to economically decouple and objected to it, but it's moving slowly forward. And so today is a meeting for the leaders an opportunity for the leaders to meet and discuss that progress. It has been criticised for not achieving very much so far. Negotiators did come to some kind of agreement on working together on supply chains, but this week they were unable to reach further agreement on rules for trade, to simplify trade between these nations. So that's something that we may well hear about later today. We don't know what the leaders will discuss yet or what outcomes there may be, but I would say that there are limited expectations. We're not likely to see major policy initiatives emerge from this meeting today. But nevertheless, they're talking about issues of common interest.
Right, of course, to all the parties involved, and we'll have updates on that probably next week during our panel session with our foreign journalists on Monday then. All right, Nicola, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Jack, it was great having your insights on this.
Always a pleasure.
Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.